A Canadian freight train hits a wall of snow and never slows down, plowing through drifts taller than a person at full speed. A few hundred miles south, an American train sits dead on frozen tracks, service canceled, roughly 1,200 train hours wiped out in a single shutdown. Same continent, same storms, completely opposite responses. One country engineered its entire rail network around the assumption that winter never ends. The other still treats snow as a disruption to manage, and the forces behind that divide run far deeper than most people realize. A freight locomotive in Canada bursts through blinding white, its rotary plow spinning, snow exploding in arcs over the rails. The engine barely slows, carving a path where the tracks vanish beneath drifts as high as the locomotive's nose. On the same continent, under the same sky, an American passenger train sits motionless, doors closed, windows fogged with breath. The rails ahead are buried, switches frozen, and the schedule slips away minute by minute. Dispatchers announce delays, then cancellations, as crews struggle with ice that locks the points and snow that piles higher each hour. The contrast is immediate and unmistakable. In one country, trains become battering rams, built to keep moving no matter how deep or heavy the snow falls. In the other, motion halts, replaced by stillness and uncertainty. The difference is not just in the equipment or the weather, it is in the expectations. For Canadian railways, winter is not a surprise. Every mile of track, every switch, every plow is designed for this. For many American railroads, winter is an interruption, something to be endured and managed, not engineered into the bones of the system. The result plays out in the footage: steel and horsepower meeting nature head-on versus a network waiting for the thaw. The question lingers behind every image. How did two neighboring countries facing the same storms end up with such opposite responses to winter on the rails? Across North America, winter brings the same basic challenge: snow on the rails, ice in the switches, and cold that tests every moving part. Yet, the way railroads meet that challenge splits along the border. To understand why, 4 areas demand attention: the original intent behind the engineering, the technical arsenal built for winter, the economics that drive investment, and the regulatory mindset shaping every operational decision. First, the foundation of each network, what engineers expected at the outset, determined whether winter would be treated as a design constant or a rare inconvenience. In Canada, main lines were routed and built with deep snow as a given. In the United States, many core routes grew out of milder climates, with only later branches facing the full brunt of winter. That original intent still echoes in today's infrastructure. Second, the technical assets on hand: rotary plows, heated switches, snow sheds, and avalanche control define how well a railway can fight back against winter. Canadian railways field fleets of specialized equipment and crews trained for round-the-clock snow clearance. By contrast, many American lines rely on a mix of basic plows and patchwork solutions, with winter gear concentrated in only the snowiest regions. Economic priorities come next. In Canada, the year-round movement of bulk goods means a single day of shutdown can ripple through export markets. Railways there invest heavily to avoid costly interruptions. In the United States, the freight mix is more varied, and short delays are often absorbed without catastrophic loss, making large-scale winterization a harder sell to investors. Finally, regulation shapes the rules of engagement. Canadian law requires strict winter readiness and allows railroads to keep moving under adverse conditions. United States regulations tend to trigger shutdowns when safety thresholds are crossed, placing the burden on each railroad's risk managers. Together, these 4 domains form the lens through which every fact in this story will be examined. On Canada's railways, winter is not an emergency. It's the normal state of affairs. This mindset runs deep, from the first spikes driven through the Rockies to the modern dispatch centers tracking every storm. Canadian National and Canadian Pacific Kansas City both operate with a simple doctrine. Snow and cold are constants, not exceptions. Every mile of track, every switch, every schedule is built around that fact. The CN winter plan spells it out plainly. Winter is a predictable yet unpredictable challenge, and the network is built for it. That means heavier rails, deeper ballast, and routes chosen for their ability to shed snow naturally, not just for the shortest distance between cities. This approach is not just about hardware. It is an institutional philosophy. Railways in Canada publish annual winter plans, mandated by Transport Canada, that detail how they will keep freight and passengers moving regardless of the forecast. These documents outline capital spending, equipment upgrades, and the training of crews who expect to fight snow every season. The CP Winter Contingency Report points to a legacy stretching back to 1881, when the original transcontinental lines were laid with the expectation that snow would be measured in meters, not inches. Engineers like Linda MacDonald, who spent decades with CN, describe how the choice of 115-pound rail and deep ballast was a direct answer to the relentless snows of Rogers Pass. She recalls that after the 1950s avalanches, lighter tracks simply could not survive. Modern plans now call for switch heaters rated to keep points clear at -20 degrees Celsius, and for rotary plows staged ahead of storms based on predictive analytics. For Canada's railways, winter is the baseline. The system is designed to absorb it, not just cope. This philosophy stands in sharp contrast to the American approach, where winterization is often a retrofit or a seasonal adjustment. In Canada, the expectation is clear. Trains move through snow because the entire system is engineered, staffed, and managed, as if winter never leaves. Rotary snowplows stand at the heart of Canada's winter rail arsenal. These machines, first designed in the 19th century and refined ever since, use a spinning drum with steel blades to carve through drifts that would stop any ordinary plow. Modern Canadian National units, rated at 3,000 horsepower, can cut a swath through up to 6 meters of compacted snow in a single pass. Canadian Pacific's fleet includes historic rotaries with 12-ton blades, powerful enough to toss snow and ice clear of the right-of-way. When a storm is forecast, dispatchers pre-position these plows at strategic yards, ready to roll before the first flakes even settle. For lighter accumulations, wedge plows and Russell wings are mounted on locomotives, pushing aside fresh snow and keeping the rails exposed. These steel wedges, some stretching over 8 meters in length, work in tandem with rotary units. The goal is relentless. Keep the main line open no matter how quickly the snow piles up. Switches, always a vulnerability in cold weather, are protected by heated systems. Gas-fired and electric switch heaters, each pumping out hundreds of thousands of BTUs, keep the moving parts above freezing, even when the air drops below -20 degrees Celsius. Some units are triggered automatically by trackside temperature sensors. Crews inspect these heaters daily, knowing that a single frozen point can halt an entire corridor. In the mountains, snow sheds shield the track from avalanches and heavy drifts. Rogers Pass, for example, sees an average of around 2 meters of snowfall each year, with storms that can dump half a meter in a single day. Here, concrete and steel galleries stretch for over a kilometer, forming tunnels that let snow and debris slide harmlessly overhead while trains pass through below. Avalanche control teams, sometimes using artillery, trigger controlled slides before the snowpack becomes dangerous. All of this hardware is backed by a dedicated workforce. Snowfighter crews work around the clock, operating plows, maintaining heaters, and clearing switches by hand when needed. Their routine is shaped by a simple reality. In Canada, winter is not a surprise, and the tools of the trade are built to match the climate's demands. In the United States, the roots of the rail network stretch back to a time and place where winter was rarely a daily concern. The first major trunk lines, Baltimore and Ohio, Pennsylvania Railroad, and Illinois Central, were mapped across temperate valleys, and rolling plains. Their builders prioritized the shortest, flattest routes between growing cities, not the harshest weather they might face. As the network expanded west and north, new lines did reach into snowier territory, but the original mindset lingered. Snow was a seasonal nuisance, not an engineering constant. This philosophy shaped everything from the thickness of the ballast to the placement of yards and the type of equipment ordered. Many American railroads optimized for efficiency in fair weather, investing in lighter rails and shallower ballast where possible, and relying on manual labor or basic plows to clear the occasional snowstorm. The assumption was simple: keep costs low, and deal with winter only when it arrived. Heated switches and rotary plows were installed sparingly, usually in the Midwest or mountain passes, but remained rare elsewhere. Operations managers like Carl Jensen, who spent decades overseeing winter response for a Class I carrier in the Midwest, describe a system built around averages. You look at the historical data. How many days a year do we actually get heavy snow? Not enough to justify building the whole network for it, Jensen explains. So we patch, we improvise, and we hope the next storm isn't the big one. This approach made sense when capital was scarce, and most freight moved south or east, away from the deepest drifts. But it left a patchwork of preparedness, with robust winter assets in a few hot spots and minimal investment elsewhere. As a result, when a blizzard hits Chicago or the Northern Rockies, the system bends quickly. Switches freeze, yards clog, and trains stack up, waiting for the weather to pass. The tools and training exist, but only where snow is a regular threat, not a national baseline. The legacy of fair weather assumptions still shapes American rail infrastructure. Funding for winterization is often fragmented, split between private railroads, state agencies, and federal grants. Projects compete with signal upgrades, bridge replacements, and new intermodal terminals. In this environment, winter resilience becomes an afterthought, addressed when the budget allows, and only to the extent that recent memory demands. American rail infrastructure is divided among private freight companies, state agencies, and federal grant recipients, creating a patchwork of ownership and priorities. Funding for winterization competes with bridge repairs, new signaling, and capacity upgrades, leading to uneven protection against snow and ice. In the Northeast and Mountain West, some corridors receive switch heaters and plow upgrades, but much of the Midwest and Great Lakes remain exposed. Sparse investment in switch heaters means even moderate snowfall can freeze turnouts, halting trains until crews arrive to clear ice by hand. Rotary plows, when available, are often stationed far from trouble spots, and ordering new equipment can take more than a year. Investment decisions hinge on risk calculations. A storm that shuts down Chicago for a day is disruptive. But if such events are rare, the logic holds that millions spent on idle hardware are hard to justify. Amtrak, the primary passenger operator, depends on tracks owned by freight railroads. When winter storms hit, Amtrak cannot compel its hosts to clear snow or keep lines open. If BNSF or Union Pacific suspends freight, Amtrak trains are halted too, sometimes for hours, sometimes for days. In 2024, Amtrak's Host Railroad Report Card logged 850,000 minutes of delay due to freight interference, much of it weather-related. Operations managers point to the economics behind these choices. Carl Jensen, who oversees winter response for a major Midwestern carrier, notes that capital for winter gear is only released after recent storms. He explains that if they have not had a major blizzard in 3 years, it is hard to justify another $1 million for heaters or plows. He says shareholders expect efficiency, not idle equipment. This cost-benefit mindset leaves passenger trains vulnerable. Unlike in Canada, where unified crews keep both freight and passenger lines clear, Amtrak's fate is tied to the decisions of profit-driven freight operators. For millions of riders, a snowstorm can mean not just delay, but total cancellation, accepted as a cost of doing business. Rules written into the very foundation of each country's rail system help explain today's divide. In Canada, winter is codified into law and engineering alike. Transport Canada's regulations require every Class 1 railway to file a detailed winter plan, spelling out how trains will keep moving when snow piles high and temperatures plunge. These rules are not suggestions. They set minimum standards for heated switches, plow deployment, and even the allowable hours of winter-related delay on critical corridors. Historian John Rogers points to the 1916 opening of the Connaught Tunnel beneath Rogers Pass as a turning point, a 5-mile bore driven not just for speed, but to bypass avalanche-prone slopes that had closed the old line for weeks at a time. 7 decades later, the Mount Macdonald Tunnel, completed in 1988, added another 8 miles of protected route, built with winter as a permanent design condition. Regulators and engineers worked hand in hand, knowing that a day lost to snow could cut off the entire Pacific Gateway. In the U.S., rules tend to follow a different logic. Federal Railroad Administration guidelines set safety thresholds. If snow or ice push conditions past those limits, railroads must halt operations until the track can be cleared. Unlike Canada's prescriptive model, American regulations often leave winter hardening as a business decision, not a legal requirement. Over time, this regulatory culture shaped what got built, how much was spent on winter gear, and how each network learned to handle the cold. The result is visible in every mile of tunnel, every heated switch, and every winter plan that is still filed today. When a United States rail line shuts down for snow, the ripple effect reaches far beyond the frozen tracks. In February 2024, a major blizzard in the Rockies forced the BNSF Northern Transcon to halt for 3 days, wiping out an estimated 1,200 train hours. That single event triggered a supply chain scramble. Automotive and grain shipments stalled, intermodal containers were rerouted to trucks, and logistics managers scrambled to find alternate routes. One logistics manager described watching a week's worth of planning unravel in less than 24 hours. The direct revenue loss reached $45 million, but the downstream impact, missed export windows, factory slowdowns, and inflated shipping costs, ran even higher, with industry sources estimating $120 million in broader disruption. Fixing these vulnerabilities is not as simple as buying a few more plows. Custom-built rotary snowplows have a lead time of more than 12 months, and retrofitting switch heaters across a network often means years of phased construction. United States operations managers point out that even when capital is approved, procurement delays and integration challenges keep new equipment off the rails for multiple winters. The cost of inaction is clear, but the hurdle to catch up is steep. As winter storms grow more frequent and intense, the question is no longer if the United States rail system can afford to invest in winter resilience, but how long it can afford to wait. Federal funding for winter rail resilience now exists in the United States, tucked into the Consolidated Rail Infrastructure and Safety Improvements Program. A dedicated stream earmarks hundreds of millions for snowshed construction, switch heater retrofits, and new plow fleets. But the grants are discretionary, fiercely competitive, and only a fraction of the network receives upgrades each year. The rest of the system waits, exposed, as storms grow more frequent and unpredictable. In the control rooms and engineering offices, the debate is no longer about whether winter is coming, but whether the country will build for it. A Canadian engineer, asked if the U.S. could adopt their approach, shrugs, "You don't get to choose your weather. You only choose whether you're ready." On the American side, a senior operations planner offers a blunt assessment. We know how to keep trains moving in snow. The question is, who's willing to pay for it? Every year, not just after the last big storm. The future of American rail depends on whether winter is treated as an occasional threat to endure or a permanent reality to engineer around. As climate models predict heavier storms and longer cold snaps, the answer will shape not just rail schedules, but the resilience of the entire economy. Today, Canadian railways move as if winter is a certainty, because for them, it is. In the US, every storm tests a system built for fair weather. As extreme weather events surge across North America, the true divide is not just snow, it is how we choose to prepare. Resilience is not automatic, it is engineered. What does your country build for? Thanks for watching. Share your thoughts below.